Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Hagan. This is Next in Sales, a next level podcast. I am so excited to introduce you guys to my special guest today. I have Jacquelyn Goldberg, who is the VP of Global Revenue at Sama, with me today. Jacquelyn, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I would love if you could give a little bit of background on yourself, just so our viewers can get to know you a little bit better before we dive right in.
Sure. So as you mentioned, my name is Jacquelyn Goldberg. I run our global revenue team here at Sama. We are an AI company, and what makes us really unique is that we're a B Corp. So we've helped to lift thousands of people out of poverty. And specifically, we're in the data labeling and annotation space. So that's what we do. More about me is I've been a revenue leader for most of my career, a salesperson at heart. So I started as a young thing and then worked my way up, and been predominantly within the startup ecosystem. So anywhere from seed to C, and even at some companies, E and F and beyond. And so that's a little bit about me.
Awesome. Well, yeah, as you mentioned, you've been a sales leader for quite some time, but curious, what is maybe one thing that you wish that you had known at the beginning of your sales career, and when and how did you learn that lesson?
It's a good question. I think one thing that I've always known about myself, and I think it's more of saying like this will end up being true, is that I always believed that I would figure it out. So I knew that I didn't always have the answers and nothing was always obvious or in front of me, but I'd figure it out. And I think that has been true for me in my career, and life happens the way it's supposed to, and to trust the process.
Absolutely. I think it's so important. I think it's interesting for me when somebody asks me, where do you hope to be in 5 years? And part of me just wants to say, I'm not really sure that I have a good answer for that, because I can just trust that I'm going to make the right decision at the right moment in my life and see where that takes me.
Definitely.
So when it comes to sales leadership, what do you think is maybe the most common mistake that you've seen people make when transitioning into that leadership role for the first time?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cliche to say that most sales leaders tend to be high performers that get promoted, and so they may not always have those skills. And I've certainly seen that. As I said, I know that's a little cliche, but that's certainly the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think that one thing that people need to do is to embrace the fact that they don't have the answers and they don't have the experience. And I think admitting that you don't know is a great start. And you may not, hopefully you have a boss or a leader that can help you through that. But if you don't, even doing basic reading, I know that when I started early in my career, I subscribed to HBR and would often read articles when I didn't have the answers. Or I'd look to other leaders that I found were strong leaders that I could emulate their success or spend time with. And then the last thing that I think is a big mistake in general of leaders, whether new or not, is just managing up. And so understanding what the company's metrics are, what your boss's metrics are, and managing to them accordingly so that you can help protect your teams against that.
Yeah, setting accountability all around is super important, and setting expectations up front, I think, in any job is vital. And so as I've mentioned before, you've helped scale a ton of different sales teams. And so I imagine that you've hired quite a few different salespeople. What is maybe your favorite interview question to ask when hiring for your sales organization, and what does the answer to that question tell you?
It's funny. I'm like, should I answer this? Because it's giving away all my secrets.
That's fair.
That being said, perhaps whoever is watching this will have done their research, right? So it may not be a bad thing. But the question I ask is, if you, knowing what you know about the role that you're interviewing for today, if you were to start tomorrow, what's the first thing you would do? And the reason I ask that question is And I don't think this is a question that matters if you're working at a startup or a large corporation, but it helps you understand more about the individual and their ability to be resourceful. We do have an onboarding program that we've put together at every company I've been at, but oftentimes that can only take you so far, and you need to figure it out yourself. And so understanding, do you need to provide this person direction or not? And if you do need to provide them direction, that may be okay for the role you're hiring for. Oftentimes for the roles I'm hiring for, that's not okay.
Gotcha. Well, and I think it's really important when you're hiring for sales especially to create a process that lends itself to quality hiring because, for salespeople, each role is going to be incredibly different, whether who you're selling to, what the product is, and all of those things. So being able to see what kind of mindset they're going to have going in is incredibly important. So I've talked to a ton of salespeople over my career, and so many have said that at least initially, the most difficult part of being in sales is pushing through rejection. What would be your advice to those who are starting out?
I think it's a tough question. I think if you should expect it. Like it should be part of the ethos of your day to day. And if you're not getting enough rejections, then you're not getting enough at bats, which means that you'll never hit your quota. So it's almost the more rejections you have, the closer you are to getting to where you need. And so I think the one thing to ask yourself before getting into sales is, have you dealt with or faced a lot of rejection in your life, or have you faced adversity before? And if the answer is no, then this might not be your first step into sales, right? Maybe you start with a softer landing to get some of that rejection under your belt. And this is probably a little bit of a strange answer, but surround yourself with positive people in your life, not just inside of work, but outside of it, because you will be dealing with so much negativity that you'll need that positive pick-me-up outside of work.
Absolutely. Well, and what changes would you like to see in sales culture maybe over the next 5 years?
I would like to see more diversity. I think that's, as a leader, and especially somebody that works at a B Corp and a female-led company, it's part of our ethos here, and one of the reasons I joined Sama. That being said, sales, it can continue to be challenging to find the right people, to have diverse thought, right? And to me, that's what's really important. And I have been volunteering with organizations to help SDRs coming up in their career come from diverse backgrounds to help us get to a place where we have more diversity in sales, and specifically tech sales, where I sit. And so that's what I would like to see more.
Well, and I'm curious, from somebody who's working currently at an AI company, what do you think the impact of AI is going to be on sales?
I think it's going to enable sales to be better and faster. I think it's really exciting. I think the insights that you can get to make your day more efficient are amazing. And so then you can work on the really, really hard things. We like to say here, even at Sama, outside of sales with the products we're selling, is we take the hard work away from the machine learning engineer so that they can focus on the really hard problems to make the algorithms better. What you get to do is not focus on the mundane tasks, you get to focus on the strategy.
Absolutely. Well, and I'm curious, how I mentioned earlier about creating processes that lend themselves to quality hiring. How do you think that you can do that in today's culture and integrate in that diversity portion?
You mean being remote or hybrid when you say today's culture?
Just in general, the sales culture.
Yeah, I think hiring is really difficult, and if it were easy, then everyone would have rock star A+ teams, right? And it's difficult to understand. Not only are they the qualified, but are they the right person for your company at this point in time? And I think that that's often a consideration that people struggle with because they can be in a lot of pain and they want to fill those roles quickly. And it's a fine balance of getting the right person in the seat quickly, not taking too much time to make the decision, but making sure you're making the right one. And so I think it's really important to be honest with yourself around what you need and will this person have an outsized impact? And that may mean you hire less people so that you have a bigger pool of budget to hire more experienced people, or you don't, right? And you're able to figure that out. But I think that can be tricky. But I think sitting down, not just writing out the job description, but writing out the competencies that you're looking for and what are the questions that go along with that you can really suss that out. I think back channeling is really important too, to make sure that the references they're giving aren't just the right ones. It can be hard sometimes to always find those back channel references, but that would be another key area that I would talk about.
Well, and I'm a little curious, when in your experience do you feel like it might make sense to work with maybe an agency to support your hiring?
I think when your bandwidth is tight, especially if you're hiring for multiple roles, I think that can be the best way to go because you need a big pipeline to make sure that you're making the right decision. And I think that's a key part of figuring it out. It's important to make sure you have the right agency though. And I've definitely worked with different types of agencies in the past. I've worked with some that were great and some that weren't the right fit for me at that time. I think it's important that they really understand who you are as a leader and a manager, your ethos, the company ethos, and the products that you're selling, so that you don't end up doing the work of the recruiter. And that's where I've struggled, is that they've punted candidates over to me and then I end up having to vet them versus them vetting them themselves. It does take a little bit of calibration in the beginning, but after a few sessions, if they can't figure it out, then you need to move on.
Absolutely. 100%. A great partnership really understands what you're looking for, both culturally, what you need for the role. And without that, it does make it incredibly difficult to have a successful partnership. And, I am curious, Jacquelyn, how did you yourself get into sales?
Good question. I started in sales when I was in high school. So I worked for a high-end fashion boutique in my hometown of Cincinnati. And at that time, on the weekends, the owner of the boutique, my boss at the time, would make me cold call to try and get people to come in and buy clothes. And so that's where I faced my first rejection. I'll never forget this woman who had, I think, 3 children and a full-time career, chastised me for calling her on a Saturday when she was spending time with her family. So that was my first experience with rejection. And I think it was a really important one. To be candid, my family is in sales. My dad ran sales organizations. And so I think it was naturally part of who I am. And over my career, or in college, I should say, I tried to fight that. But in the end, it came back to me, and that's just where I naturally fit.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm curious, what advice might you give to women who are looking to get into sales leadership positions today?
Go for it. That would be my advice.
I love it.
I think oftentimes, it's interesting. I get asked this question a lot about being a female leader. And my answer is I don't think about it often, which I know is a strange question or a strange answer to that question. You just got to go for it. And men will go for it, even if they don't have everything that they need to be qualified. But just enter the race. What's the worst that can happen? The answer is going to be no. But maybe you'll get answers as to when it could be a yes.
Absolutely. I think that there's a lot of things that sometimes women will be overthinking and they don't go for it. And sometimes that's just the little push that you need. Well, I've loved having you on here today, Jacquelyn. Do you have any other advice, personal or professional, that you'd like to share with our viewers before we wrap up?
I think my biggest piece of advice is trust your gut and trust yourself and trust the process, as I said in the beginning. Because in the end, if you believe in yourself, then you will win in the end. And so I think that that's one piece of advice I would give.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacquelyn. I've loved having you on today, of course. Everybody, again, this is Next in Sales, the Next Level podcast. If you liked what Jacquelyn or I had to say today, I would highly recommend liking, commenting, subscribing, sharing this with your network, colleagues, friends, family, etc. I hope you have a great week, and I will see you next Friday.